everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my channel. I am continuing work on my English Regency court gown project this week, as you can see behind me here. If you have not seen the first video on that, I will link that down below in the description. That's where I basically made the entire skirt, trying to figure out how to turn fabric on its angle with the stripes on the angle and suspending like all of the undergarments and everything. So definitely go check that video out. But while I am waiting for potential trims to arrive for the skirt, that means that it's now time to turn our attention to the upper portion of the dress, the bodice. So I'm just gonna put the fashion plate on right here, which again, it's not really a fashion plate. If you watched last video, you'll know there was this whole description of this. This is actually representative of a gown that was made, which is really cool. And as you can see, this bodice laces up the front, or at least has a lace up decoration in the front with some like gold cord in there. So I have to figure out how this all works. I am making this over what basically fits me like transitional stays. It's a short-waisted 18th century stays, basically a pair of 18th century stays that is very prow fronted, which is what you see in the earlier part of the 1790s. This is a dress that's dated to 1795, and so that is really the proper foundation for a dress like this. Later on, you're going to see for English Regency court gowns, you're going to see very much a Regency top where you think of like the very uplifted cups and then kind of that straight silhouette body. But again, this one, we're looking very conical and prow fronted here. So that means that I have to figure out how to do this pattern because I don't have any 1790s patterns, and I kind of did a quick cursory Google search to try and find, you know, what 1790s bodice patterns are out there, and there's really nothing for what I'm looking for. Most of what you see as available patterns are like very much a gathered front look and maybe an overdress or pelisse where it kind of comes around and wraps under the bust. So I don't know if I can like adapt that to fit my needs, but I think I might have to. One thing that I do want to do is the Regency shaped back. So I am probably actually going to just use my Laughing Moon Regency dress pattern that I just used a couple weeks ago for that upcycled Regency Bridgerton dress. I'm probably going to use that for the back, and then most likely it's going to have to be tapered in a little bit as it goes lower down the body, like nearer to the waist, because the conical silhouette does take that in more. Like again, it's like this as opposed to like this. But I like that shape of the back where you get that kind of curving in like this and the side back pieces, and then the low seam for the shoulder that's kind of like low on the back there. So that's what the back is going to look like. And then I just have to figure out the front, and honestly I think I'm going to have to kind of drape this bodice pattern on myself, and I am trying to figure out if it's better to start with a Regency pattern or if it's better to start with like a 1780s pattern, because that's what I have. I could use like the Amalia jacket pattern potentially, but I feel like there's a lot of alterations that are gonna have to go from that to this. Or I could start with like a simplicity type 1790s pattern that has like the shirred front. To be honest, my thought with something like this simplicity pattern is to potentially just take the gathering out of it and make it fit. I don't know if that's going to work, but I feel like it's going to be closer than starting with an 18th century pattern. This is very much in between the two. So we are going to start first with just like lots of mock-ups with this project and see what fits. So I know that this is one of those things that's like, duh, of course it was going to be really different and not remotely fit right away. But yeah, the Laughing Moon pattern is really different over stays and does not remotely fit right away. Now, granted, there is a dart in the Laughing Moon pattern if you're looking at the one that's like not gathered. I was trying to figure out if there's a way to like, you know, turn this, basically pivot this front part so that I'm taking the excess out of the center front as opposed to having a dart. So I am going to play around with all of this in the mirror, but then also like the back doesn't fit either. And I added 2 inches to the front and only 1 inch to the side back and the back. So that's why there's a disparity here. But I have to figure out which one is correct, if either, because I feel like the back is actually maybe a little too short. considering that this waist is like slightly dropped from Regency. The reason that I added the length was because I knew that this wasn't going to have the waistband like I normally have with this pattern, with the Laughing Moon pattern. But yeah, this is quite off. So this is gonna take some time in the mirror, and we're gonna see if we can translate this into something that actually works. I've made a whole second mock-up now here. Literally all of these pieces are recut, but one thing that I forgot to do while I was recutting was to add seam allowance around the neckline. And honestly, I think even beyond the seam allowance, this does need to come up just a little bit, just for my own personal comfort. To be perfectly frank, this is still high for this era of neckline. Like, their necklines were so low. And really, I don't know that like the base layer needs to come up higher, but I am going to have this like ruched trim thing, basically this part of the fashion plate right here, that is going to go around the neckline there. So I don't know if that should be actually built on to like the base bodice, or if that should be almost acting as trim and just applied to the top. And then because that's ruched, it can pull up and provide a little bit more coverage around the neckline too, which is great. But I do think that now things are looking pretty good. So as far as like the changes that I made from the original Laughing Moon, I think you saw kind of that overlap that I was getting there. So basically I just pulled the overlap up so that I could have no darts around the waist and just have that flush. And so it kind of acted like where the darts were was a pivot point, and then I just needed to fill in this little triangle area here from where the original fabric had like crossed back up, and then I cut off all the excess that was here, because out here I had like, I don't know, 3 inches or something like that excess at that point. And then in the back, I both took it in and I lengthened it. And I think I do need to take it in just a tiny bit more where I have lengthened it, but it's pretty darn close. I did also take out like 1/8 of an inch in the side back, I believe, and I tipped the armscye down just a little bit and took actually about a 1/2 inch out of, I think, the back piece only at the shoulder and tapering it into where it's fitted at the neck. So I think this is really good. I need to try it on with the skirts to make sure that where I have it hitting is a good length. It might be a little bit long is what I'm hoping, like up to a 1/2 inch long, but I think the fit is pretty good once I bring up the neckline or figure out that ruched bit. So I have everything on, and interestingly, the thing that really was not working once I put everything on is that the shoulders are like way too long. I think you can see this sort of like thin that I've pinned out here. So I have to make that adjustment to get rid of all of that excess length. And I think it's just probably a combination of like the straps and then obviously shortening the waist some, but also adding bulk to the waist. So everything kind of wound up moving up. And yeah, the neckline is still low, but I think I am going to build that ruffle ruched part on as trim as opposed to as like part of the actual bodice. And I am actually just going to leave this as is, because like if we look at the actual plate, that sort of scoop that's like the faux fur area is super, super low. Like it's crazy low. And that is not actually fur. If we go back to the description, it is a tippet, which I think is like a tail. To be honest, I'm not sure, but I think it's like an end of blonde, which is a type of lace, by the way. Blonde is lace. The outside of gold imitating fur. So I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do for that like fur look, but something. I don't know. The one thing though is I do wonder if I actually have everything too high. I feel like I'm almost too short-waisted compared to the plate, and I could pretty easily drop everything down just a little bit lower. It would just mean redoing all of the straps on this. But yeah, looking at it here in the actual camera, more so even than in the mirror, I do feel like it's looking very high for this era, but I'm a little bit worried that if I drop it much lower, it's just going to look like it's at my waist. Like it's not gonna look like that high court gown. But I feel like right now we're reading very like 18 teens as opposed to 1790s. So I might drop that by 1/2 inch, which of course means that I'd change probably what's going on with the shoulder. I do have this folded up a little bit in the front. I think it was about a 1/2 inch too long just in the front because it kind of came to a little bit of a point once I put everything on. But Yeah, I might drop that a little bit lower, and I am gonna really have to train to wear this, frankly, because almost the instant that I put on the petticoat in particular, it just like brought down on my shoulders. It feels so heavy on my shoulders. The other day after wearing it for 2 hours from the last video, it just like my shoulder was hurting as if I was carrying a really, really heavy bag the whole time, particularly my left, probably because I normally carry my purse on my right. But yeah, it is quite a weight, even though it doesn't seem like it should be. I took the shoulder in. It is almost perfect. As you can see, it is still bubbling just a little bit right there. So I am going to take a little bit more out of the front shoulder strap, but overall pretty good. I haven't cut off the bottom here yet, but it just needs to get shortened by about 1/2 inch right at the center. And then there is the seam allowance that's down here as well that will get, you know, brought up. And then everything will get built onto the neckline, and you know, it's going to be made out of the silk. I am going to create a pattern from this. No, I haven't yet figured out how to make patterns available to other people, but this is one that I think would be useful because a pattern like this doesn't exist. So if I can figure out how to make this as like a pattern that you can download off of Etsy, I will do that, but it's not going to be anytime within the next like month or so for sure. So anyway, this is successful mock-up at this point, and I can go ahead and cut it out of the silk. And then what will happen in the back is that I will have the remainder of the red silk, or almost the remainder because a little bit does have to get used on the sleeves, but the rest of the length of the silk is going to come down in the back, extending from the waist down as a train, and that's literally just going to be the full width of the silk fabric, like straight panel, no shaping or anything like that. So that part at least will just be pleated up to the back and be just super, super easy. So I decided to do a test with the sequins just to see what it would look like. And it was going fine at first, but it did get a little bit puckery right just on this curve. Like this curve was fine. And so I pressed it from the back side, I might add, and on, oh, my iron is too high. Whoops. I thought my iron was set on wool. It's not, it's set on cotton, and my sequins melted. Yeah, I mean, they don't actually look bad, I feel like, from afar, but just for contrast, this is what they looked like beforehand. So definitely like shinier. This looks like hammered metal, which is kind of cool, but I'm definitely gonna have to be careful about ironing my sequins if I go this route. I do think, especially before I ironed it, I do think that it looked very cool. So I think I probably will do this, but it is a humongous commitment because obviously the skirt is huge. Oh, and by the way, this test was done with just a wide spaced zigzag stitch with a metallic top thread and just a regular thread for the bobbin. And this was using a piping type foot where it kind of has a gap underneath. I do actually have a specialty foot for applying sequins that's arriving tomorrow. So I'm interested to see if it's any better because I did find it was quite hard to do the curvy parts, which is probably why it got puckered over here. So I got the new foot in the mail from Amazon and it's going back because let me show you what happened. I did a couple more tests. This was my original test that I melted, but that did look pretty good overall. And then this is the second test here. It started off really bad because the instructions tell you to just use a straight stitch. And this is the area that happened with the straight stitch. That looked just awful. Obviously, I'm not even on the line. And then I switched to a zigzag, which is what I had been doing before. This time I'm using like the clear fishing wire type thread, and this is the result that I got. So it just looks really rough, like it was hard to steer it around and still get it to line up. Just wasn't great. So then I decided to do one more test with the fishing wire this time and back to my pearls and pipings foot, and this was the result that I got. I'm just freehanding drawing these on with a fabric pen, the friction pen, by the way, and I think I might do that for the actual spirals. Like, I don't think that I really need them to be completely uniform. I don't know. I'm sure it might look better that way, but that seems like a lot of effort because I'd have to like create some sort of a stencil or something like that that I could then, you know, use to draw everything on. But doing this freehand, I mean, I think that looks really good. I didn't need to press this even, like it didn't pucker at all this time. So I think clearly the fishing wire is the way to go. I mean, that's where it looks like with the fishing wire. So you can see the little thread right across there. Obviously this is going to look different because these melted, but I do feel like this thread maybe blends in a bit more, but it was harder to get the right tension, which was why I had the puckering. So I think that the clear thread works really well, and I think that's going to be the choice, is the Pearls and Pipings foot with the clear thread on a zigzag stitch, and that will be what my S-curves look like. And it already looks really cool, even just on this sample. While we are on the topic of trims, let's talk about skirt trims. So I've been posting a bunch of polls on Instagram asking you guys about various skirt trims, because I think I showed you my original trim that I had in my stash that I quite liked, which was this one right here. It's a much more yellow gold, and I've been trying to find something similar that could be purchased off of Amazon for cheap and quick, and coming up kind of with nothing in this color story. So what I had found were, these are 2 of them. I purchased 4 actual trims. One of them was an instant no because it just wasn't a Venice lace like this. I just didn't like it. And then this one you guys have been absolutely loving, and I love the novelty of it. Like, I think it is so cute with all the stars and moons, but honestly it blends in to the skirt quite a bit. And obviously it's also not very historical accurate, though, I mean, stars and moons, you know, it's cute. But I just feel like the sparkle doesn't really sparkle. Like, all of these are metallic threads, but this one, the threads just don't sparkle very much. And so I was going back and forth with maybe I could layer that on top of this and have that look, but then I would still need to order this, which is like 36 bucks, and I need to wait a couple weeks for it. And then this trim finally got here. It was one that I'd ordered from Amazon, but it took longer than the others. So this just got here today, and I think it might be the winner. Like, I don't kind of love the motif super much, but when you're farther away, you don't notice the motif as much. Like, I wish that that one was stars and moons, but it sparkles a lot more than the stars and moons do, and it's just slightly warmer toned, which is really what I want. Like, if you look at these together, and I don't know if the light is working well enough on here, but I feel like this looks just a little grayer, and this has just that little bit more of a warmer gold, which I really like. So I think that this is gonna be the winner. It was cheap, it was on Amazon. I will link to all these trims below, because honestly, like, I wish that I needed this. It's so cute. I will definitely be saving this link for a future project because it's so cute. And then there was also one other trim, which did not at all work for the skirt, but I'm not returning it yet because I think I'm actually going to use it on the bodice. This one is honestly maybe the most sparkly of all, and it is so beautifully delicate. I hope the sparkle and the delicacy are coming across on here. The real way to make it shine is once we put it on the red silk, which is my plan, because I feel like under the lace up front, or the faux lace up front, because that's what it's going to be, there is a lot more gold than just the lacing, and I feel like this would be so pretty. And then I'm not really sure exactly how I'm going to do the lacing, but I'm kind of thinking of maybe having like some lacing rings like right through these little points, so the laces go back and forth across the opening, but like into these points. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I am going to close this with hooks and eyes instead, or really it's hooks and bars instead. So I have made a little facing for this, so you can see this is the one that laps over. We've got that facing that just turns under there, and then this is the facing that laps under. So I didn't cut it with enough room to go under, so I created an extra little facing there, and then this is going to meet up with where that line is, which is the center front. And then if I put the pretty trim like that on the edges, and then have the lacing that goes across go like that, I think that would be really pretty. But anyway, the bodice is all assembled now, but it's not finished or anything, because I always like to try on a bodice before I finish off all of the edges. So I guess it's time for that. Although there is one other trim that I'd really like to use on the bodice. I forget exactly where I got this trim. Either it had been added to an antique bodice that I had purchased, but it was like not original to the bodice, I can't remember, or I got it with a bunch of vintage trims, and I think it is so beautiful. It is an antique, and this is actually, I think, like bullion trim. I don't know if hopefully you can see the texture in there. It is so gorgeous. There is not very much of it. Like, literally, I have these pieces right here. But I did check, and that is actually enough to like go around the front portion of the neckline. So it's possible that I might do that, or maybe I will use it on the sleeves, but I feel like the colors are so perfect for this project that it would be just really gorgeous to be able to use this antique trim on this project. So I'm drawing my first motif line on the skirt right now, but I might have to unpleat this, which is going to be really, really annoying to have to like replete it. I mean, at least it's all pressed in place and I'll have like the scars, but like I can't draw the line in this little area right here. I just can't get to it. So yeah, that's annoying. So basically for every stripe, because every stripe does go up into the waistband, I'm gonna have to take out like this much of the pleating, which as you can see, it's like not actually very much of the waistband, but it is a significant amount of fabric just to get in there to run the sequins. So I have marked the line for the sequins for the first row all the way down to the hem. Let's go ahead and put some sequins on. I completed the first row of zigzag sequins. This row actually goes all the way around the entire skirt and ends up right over here down at the bottom. This whole row took me, just sewing on the sequins, 1 hour and 15 minutes to do. And honestly, I don't think it's going to get any faster. I didn't time the actual laying out of the placement of the row. I think that took about 20 to 30 minutes. That didn't feel too bad. But basically each point is 6 inches apart from the next one, with the bottom one obviously 3 inches from the top one. And then I just made the points and then I just drew the lines freehand. And of course there is a little bit of zigging just from the nature of sequins kind of moving a little as you put them on. Naturally, one of the worst ones is right here in the front of the top. But yeah, that's what that looks like so far. Because that took so long and was so tedious, for right now, I'm going to do every other stripe and then I will go back and do the stripes in between. And I've pinned this back up. I just need to stitch that back in place underneath the waistband. So the bodice is on and it seems to be fitting fine. It was really challenging to pin because the facing was already kind of like tucked in there and getting in the way, even though it wasn't sewn in place. But that means that I can go ahead and just like finish off the edges. I think I'm going to just bind the bottom edge, except for where in the back it's going to meet up with the train section. And I've been debating about binding off the arm size and then like whip stitching the sleeves in so that I could potentially use this for something else, like as just some sort of police. But to be honest, I'm kind of feeling at this point, with the weirdness of the shape of all of this, like it's probably not going to fit over other things, because it is wider here where all of the waistbands are, and then we've got the straps, which today the straps are sitting weirdly. Like the straps are actually showing outside of the neckline and they have not been doing that before. So, and it's hurting more on this side almost instantly. So something weird is going on with straps, and I'm gonna have to pay attention when I put those sorts of things on. But yeah, I think that there's kind of no point in like finishing this off separate to the sleeves, so I'll probably just set the sleeves right in. The neckline is going to just be bound off, and then that binding is kind of going to be hiding within the trims and stuff. So I was playing with trims, possibly doing some ruffles of lace as opposed to doing the ruched up fabric, because it does say that this is blonde, which is lace. So I have this lace that has this gold metallic through it, and I thought maybe if I tea dyed the white so it's not so stark, that might be fun. And then I also have to figure out how we're doing that like fur like trim. I'm not doing it however they say, because I don't understand what that exactly that is. So I'm probably going to use like fake fur fabric, or maybe fake fur trim if I can find some at Joann's. So yeah, I have that marked on the inside where that goes, but that's going to be an experiment. To be honest, the way that the description says a tippet of blonde, the outside of gold, it does almost make me wonder if it means lace. Like if we took the same lace that's going around the bottom of the skirt and kind of just gathered and ruched that all up with the blonde, in quotes, lace above it, maybe that would be kind of the look. I might have to play around and experiment with things. I am not setting the lace on the skirt until after all of the sequins are done, because I want the ends to fit in underneath, the ends of the sequins to fit in underneath the lace. But I held up like a strip of the fur, and it just looks way too rough and tumble for everything else on this outfit. So I really think that the fur is the wrong way to go, and that probably the lace, like a gold lace, is actually the right way to go. The other option is I could maybe ruche up velvet, because I do have some gold velvet, so maybe that's a possibility. But I like the idea of the lace picking back up from the skirt to the bodice, especially since I'm planning to use that other lace alongside the front of the bodice. It might be nice to have the same skirt lace up here. Granted, it would mean that I would almost certainly need to buy more of it, because there's meant to be 5 yards on that, and I need like 4.75, I think, for the skirt hem. But it's not a big deal. It was like, I don't know, $14 on Amazon or something like that. So yeah, not a big deal with that. But I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to have to experiment and play around, but obviously not while I'm wearing these things. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and add all of the finishing onto here and onto the neckline. I may actually bring down and out the neckline just a little bit, because it is very gappy right in here. So I might fix that. I think if I have time with this project before costume college, I may actually make a new petticoat really just for this, because this petticoat, although it's just cotton sateen, it adds so much weight, and it's really what's weighing down my shoulders. So that might be a good idea, like out of cotton organdy or something. The bodice is attached to the skirt. I just did really narrow knife pleats to sew that on. And then right now I'm working on doing the binding on the neckline up here and also on the waist. Over here, I basically took some binding and matched where the seam line was here, and then folded it up, pressed it, and pinned it. So some of that's stitched, some of it's just pinned. And then I have decided that this beautiful gold trim that I really want to use on the front of the bodice too would look so pretty going down the edges and the hem of the dress itself, highlighting your squeaking while I'm trying to record. And right now, I've basically decided I am not going to trim this train until I know what needs to be used for other things. So basically, I have already marked out what's going to be needed for the kind of mid-sleeve cuffs, which are these sort of trapezoidal sections right here. I believe they are 5 by 16, or no, 17 at the widest, and then it's an 1.5 inches smaller, so 15.5 at the narrower, which is the lower part of the arm. So those are all set to be made up once I have the sleeves ready. But within this section here, I also do have to get the little like puffy part of the turban in the back for my hair. So yeah, that's gonna have to come out somewhere in here, and it's a very like ragged cut at the bottom. I put in a line of pins, which is the line straight across if I were to just be able to cut it there. But somewhere in here, I'm going to need to get that hat out of there. So I think that's going to shorten at least a little bit, because the hat is definitely bigger than like this little piece right here. So I'll probably have to shorten it, but that's fine, because like, look how long the train is, which is awesome. I was worried that I wouldn't have much of a train at all. So that's very exciting to see. All of the hand finishing around the bodice is now complete, and as you can see, I have the little trim right in the front pinned in place. The top portion of this is going to get covered over with that like whatever faux fur lace ruffle sort of thing going on, probably to about here. But yeah, this I thought looks very, very nice, and ideally I will have my lacing points kind of connect into here for just that little front lace up, but that means we have to go to Joann's and find some gold cord to lace it up. So I've decided to do a little test of the trims up here just to see if it would kind of imitate fur. And I feel like it does actually kind of have that furry quality. So I've taken the same lace that I put right here, this one right here, and I've just gathered it up with the sewing machine. And then I've also taken, I think I showed you guys this flat wide lace earlier. I had thought originally about dyeing it just a little bit, tea dyeing it, but honestly, it's a pretty close color to this. And I feel like if I tea dye it, it's going to actually wind up going darker than this. This is the sleeve fabric up here, what I intend to use for the sleeve fabric, which you can see has the gold metallic stripe through it as well. So that gold metallic picks up here in the lace. And then it also, I feel like, brings out some of the higher points of gold shine from the gold lace. So I don't mind that that is a different color. I think we've got a lot of different shades of gold going on for decoration on this gown. But yeah, I feel like it does look a little furry when we like step away from it a bit. So I think that will give the right look. I am debating about running another gathering stitch kind of right along the top of this lace, which of course is going to be a real pain now that I've already gathered it up. But I do feel like when we look at the fashion plate or the original plate that it does seem like it kind of comes together up at the top. So I don't know, it's possible that I might need that, but I think that that has a pretty decent look going for it. So now I'm finally going to go to Joann's and get the gold cord that I need for here. I also need just like a gold sort of metallic ribbon belt so that I can get this going on where that belt is right in there. So I do need that as well. But just those two things I think are basically it. I also don't know if she's wearing a chatelaine here or something. I don't have a chatelaine, so I'll probably just have to forgo that. But I don't know. We'll see if we can figure something out by the time costume college comes around. But yeah, that's what it's looking like so far. I have sewn all of the lace onto the front of the bodice, probably being a little too ridiculous about sewing it on because I sewed it all on with metallic thread, meaning that my thread basically tangled and or broke and or like stripped itself every like, I don't know, 2 inches of stitching all of this on. But at the same time, like you can't see it. I feel like it looks so good. So hopefully it was worth the extra effort because it took me like, I think an hour and a half just to sew all of this on, which is a stupid long amount of time for this sort of thing when I'm just doing whip stitching. But anyway, that is done. However, I have run out of time for this week to put on the rest of the trim, meaning like all of the ruffle stuff trim there. So that means this week we are leaving off right at that point with the 2 rows of sequins on the skirt and with the little bit of trim here on the bodice, but the rest of it kind of like prepped to go. And next week we'll be starting off with actually putting that trim onto the bodice, and then I think doing sleeves will be the next big thing, and also putting the little rings on so that I can do the laces. I did go to Joann's. I have a couple options for lacing up the front, so I'm not sure yet what I will go with, but I'll go over that more in the next video. So that's gonna be it for this video. If you like this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube at least once a week with sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays and sometimes additional costuming or sewing content out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks or join my YouTube channel memberships right here on YouTube below the video. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Jean, Dan, and Kim. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!